been involved with social justice, anti-poverty, and urban issues in Canada for many years. He's the chairman and founder of Maitrey Foundation and chairman and CEO of Avana Capital Corporation. He co-founded and chairs the Caledon Institute of Social Policy, Tamarack Institute, and the Institute for Municipal Finance and Governance at the Monk Centre at the U of Toronto. Alan is the author of an excellent book, Urban: Why We Need to Give Power Back to the Cities to Make Canada Strong, and he's co-editor of 5 Good Ideas, Practical Strategies for Nonprofit Success. Mayor Doug Craig was elected mayor in November 2000 and re-elected with a substantially increased majority in 2003, 2006, 2010, and 2014. As mayor, he has used the real and symbolic power of the office to promote and encourage philanthropy and the arts. Among his proudest accomplishments have been the Mayor's Walk for Volunteerism, Mayor's Movie Night, the Mayor's Celebration of the Arts, and his role in helping to bring the University of Waterloo School of Architecture to the Galt Corps, not only renovating a century-old silk mill, but injecting new youth and vitality into the city with projects such as Brayton Theatre, Back to the River initiatives, and promoting clean industry parks. Pam Wolf is a teacher for Waterloo Region District School Board and the City of Cambridge Councillor for Ward 5, West Galt. She was first elected to this position in 2006 and sits on many committees representing the city. Among these have been the Fair Wage Committee and the Poverty Elimination Roundtable. And Pam has also been on the steering committee for the city's strategic plan and has helped craft the city's vision, Cambridge, a place for people to prosper, alive with opportunity. Welcome to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation you're going to have. And Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you now as our guest interview.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much, Mark, and hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining us today, and hello especially to Doug and Pam. Nice to have you and have this opportunity to chat with you about what you've been achieving in Cambridge. And congratulations to you and the City of Cambridge for becoming the first municipality in Ontario to adopt a living wage policy. This is a great accomplishment. So let's talk about the situation in Cambridge and get a sense of why this policy was adopted. What does poverty currently look like in Cambridge, and how will the living wage help to offset some of the income imbalance for individuals employed by the city?
Well, the City of Cambridge has a population, Alan, of about 135,000 people, and approximately 12% of that population, about 15,000, live at or below the low-income measure. 54% are women, 46% are men, and out of this, children represent about 11.5%. And that's higher than the Ontario child poverty rate of 8.9, higher than Canada's at 8.2. So the working poor, they account for about approximately 5.5% of the working population of the city. People working full-time make up 7% of the families accessing emergency food hampers, and 41% of the renters in Cambridge spend more than 30% of their income on shelter. You know, Cambridge in many ways, it's like all cities. Once you start peeling back the layers, we're very successful in many, many ways. I mean, we have industry here such as ComDev and Toyota, and we have done very well in terms of our advanced manufacturing, providing good quality jobs for people. But on the other side, when you start peeling back the layers, you find this. You find in terms there is a working poor, there are people in need, there are people that need to be supported, and we needed to act, I think, more assertively in terms of helping these people. I want to point out something I think is very important to this whole conversation. This was advanced, the whole issue around the living wage was advanced by Pam, Councillor Pam Wolf. And she's the mainstay on council in terms of leading us and directing us in terms of issues that we need to support in the community, such as the poverty issues, affordable housing issues. So she's been great in terms of helping direct us and getting us to where we are today. Mayors always get credit for everything, but I want to make sure that it's understood that Pam is in fact the leader in this whole issue.
I think Doug's a little too kind, but thank you very much. For us, paying our city employees a living wage is just one step in helping to lower the number of working poor. As a living wage employer, we show that we care about our employees and the community. We understand the long-term economic benefits of a healthy, dedicated workforce. A decrease in absenteeism, turnover, and increase in productivity are a few of the advantages to the employer. We also know that the greatest determinant of health is how much a person earns. So it follows that paying a people a living wage will make our community healthier. Not only does a living wage ensure that families are not under severe financial stress, the money earned by employees making a living wage is spent in our community, adding to the local economy. These are some of the economic advantages for paying a living wage, but the most compelling argument is that it is simply right, that all families should earn an income sufficient for them to pay for the necessities of life.
That's very, very persuasive, and I'm wondering, then, Pam, obviously you've come to this with some insight and some passion, and Doug is prepared to lead on it as well. But what attracted City Council itself to the idea, because you had to persuade other people, what persuaded them to the idea of implementing the living wage policy, and what prompted the city itself to become a living wage employer? Did you receive a lot of encouragement, a lot of pressure from the community to take this step?
Well, I'll just give a bit of an introduction here. Pam has a very passionate view on this, and she, in fact, brought this to council for us to have a discussion and to pass the series of motions. But it always comes from an individual who is, in the grassroots of the community, who, in fact, gets a better sense of what's happening. And I'll let Pam continue, but this is where it really started.
As you said in my biography, I was on the Fair Wage Committee, and we had a poverty roundtable here for the elimination of poverty. And I chair the Affordable Housing Committee, so I'm in touch with many people in the community that are involved with social service. The Living Wage Waterloo Region Committee approached us after they, in early 2015, with their program, and I thought that we have a progressive council, and I thought I would be able to convince them to adopt the program. So the Living Wage Committee made a presentation to council, and with the other councillors and myself, we passed a motion saying that we would become a supporter of the living wage at that rung on the ladder, and from there we'll continue to work and hopefully become a champion. Another thing that really helped us in convincing people was the fact that we had just in 2015 did a new strategic plan. And with that strategic plan, we went out to the community and asked the community for direction. And one of the things we received direction on was that the community was looking for a living wage as well. So that made it a lot easier for us to get past council, and many of the people who feel that maybe it's too difficult to do. As you see on your screen, our City of Cambridge corporate values that we've embraced are integrity, respect, inclusiveness, and service. And to show respect for our staff, we feel we have to pay them a living wage. And to give the service to our community, we also know that when you value your employees, they're more invested in their jobs, and they'll give better service.
Great. Pam, you mentioned rung on a ladder that you achieved, and I know when you become an official living wage employer, there's a clear process you must follow and accountability guidelines you must meet in order to maintain your employer status. As you mentioned earlier, only full-time employees receive over $16 an hour at this time, and you're working to eventually phase others into the living wage to move up from what you are now as a living wage supporter to a living wage champion. So what will this process look like over time?
Well, as you say, we're at the supporter level. So right now, our full-time employees do receive over $16.05 an hour. So the first part we're doing right now is looking at our part-time employees, and with our committee, which is made up of some staff, both our union presidents, a member of the Waterloo Region Living Wage Committee, and myself, we're getting our definitions in order of what's a student, what's a part-time employee, to line up with living wage. And then we're looking at our part-time employees and how much we actually have to raise them and how we're going to do that. So we're going to be bringing back to Council our plan for doing that in the 2017 budget, because obviously it's going to cost some money to raise our part-time employees to a living wage. And at the same time, we're looking at some of our contract employees. For instance, I think maybe on another screen, we've talked a little bit about how much we're actually paying for our contracts and seeing what they're actually paying their employees and seeing is it better for us to bring that service back in-house or how much it would actually cost. So the first step is the part-time employees, raising them. Then our second step, which may be in a year, is looking at some of our contract employees and going all the way through to leader, where we're looking at our student positions and more contracts, and hopefully someday we'll be at the champion, which is all full-time and part-time employees and students in contract.
So this is really is then a process that you're committed to making progress, as you say, climbing the rungs of the ladder to get to the top level where you'll be a champion. I think that's terrific to understand that it is not just a one-shot thing, but you're progressively working your way through it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. No, I'm just going to say that we are very committed to this whole progress, and like you say, we are at one of the bottom rungs right now, but it's we can see where we're heading. We've got a commitment of the Council of 9, 8 of us are committed to this, so I think which in itself signals to the community that there's strong support on the council level for this, and we'll be moving this along as quickly as we can. But I've always found in any projects we do that you're introducing into a community, small steps are always good, and then you build the confidence in the community, you build recognition in the community of why you're doing what you're doing, and it becomes more acceptable.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the questions that always comes up when in living wage discussions and kind of as you unleash the power of a living wage policy is about what discussions and considerations you might have about requiring others, say those doing business with the city, key suppliers of goods and services, for example, to pay their employees a living wage. I'm wondering what kind of discussions you've been having about that so far and what your thinking might be.
Well, I think in the initial stage, it's interesting the reaction of the community. Chamber of Commerce was wary of what we were doing, concerned about how that impact would affect them across the Cambridge community. But we're aware of that, and like I said, you take it in small steps, and you try to then raise the bar each time in terms of what you're doing, and convince people that we're heading in the right direction. But again, it's like all projects. I've never done a project yet where there isn't concern or opposition or some or a misunderstanding about what's happening. So these are the things we have to work through. And again, I come back to the slow evolutionary model.
Yeah. If you look at that slide, right now we pay the cleaners, which are contracted, are paid $11.50 an hour. But when we looked at what we are actually paying the contractor per person, it's $16.71 per hour. Same thing for security. They're $12.25 an hour. we pay the contractor $14.15 an hour. So there are, you know, different things that we can look at and see. It really might not be that much more to pay the cleaners, the $16.05 an hour, which would be the living wage here. And the other thing is, as a councillor, I don't think I ever realized that when we look at our tender system for contracts, that we always have to choose the lowest. And I always thought, okay, it's lowest and efficient, you know, or the company's taking less profit. I never really thought about it, that by taking the lowest tender, we're most probably taking the employer who pays their employees the least. And at $11.50 an hour, that's below the poverty line or the low income measure. And, you know, as a corporation, is that showing integrity? Is that showing that we value the people that work for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Is that the example you want to be setting? Yeah. So I'd like to raise, change the focus just a little bit here. I'd like to raise the issue of human rights, and this is something that we at Maitrey are very focused on and interested in. I was in Geneva with my colleague Elizabeth McIsaac a few weeks ago for the UN periodic review of Canada's performance on its human rights commitments. These are international covenants that Canada has signed, and the federal government has signed them, committing us to recognize and support and move progressively towards a broad group of social and economic rights. And those are rights like affordable housing, like access to good nutrition, like fair wages and equal pay. And the interesting thing about these covenants that a lot of people don't realize is that when the federal government signs them, they also commit all subnational governments. Those include the provinces and the municipalities. And so they confer on the municipalities, in this case, a obligation to observe and protect people's human rights. And so I'm wondering whether Cambridge has included the rights lens in its discussions, and if so, how is it prepared to use that perspective going forward?
Well, I think we did, especially in our strategic plan when we looked at our values. And I know we have looked at it in discussing affordable housing, that it's become a priority in Cambridge. As the slide says, we've just passed recently some municipal incentives to encourage affordable housing. We're pleased with the announcement from the provincial government about inclusionary zoning. Mm-hmm. And because again, it's easier, you know, using the human rights argument, we can convince people, hopefully, to do the right thing, which is provide affordable housing, and living wage fits into that. As you see, the International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights, Article 7, really pointed out a decent living for themselves and their families in accordance with the provisions of the covenant, fair wages. All these things, you know, help us with our argument in convincing companies and organizations like the BIA, Chamber of Commerce, that we're obligated to move in this direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can be a very powerful tool, I think, in helping people understand that these aren't just choices we make, but obligations we have to protect people's rights. One last question from me before we get to some of the questions from that people have submitted on the call. Tamarack is organizing, as you know, a gathering in Edmonton next month to bring together government representatives, including mayors and city councillors, poverty reduction advocates, community leaders, and others, to explore all the ways that mayors and municipalities are leading in poverty reduction. So what advice would you give to other mayors and city councillors in Canada who are just beginning to explore poverty reduction measures such as the living wage? And I'd add on to that, you know, how do we capture some of what you're learning in this process as you're going through?
Well, I think the really tough thing, and Alan, you and I have discussed this a little bit earlier. I mean, for municipalities to flourish and for municipalities to do what they're supposed to be doing, beyond just being janitors for picking up leaves and clearing snow, we have to have the revenue streams that are necessary for communities to deal with poverty issues, immigration issues that we're now facing, climate change, all of those things. I think my advice to all other mayors would be, you know, we can accomplish all these things. Allow us to do this and unfetter us to do it in terms of edicts and different laws that are passed down by the provincial and federal government. Allow us to do it, but also give us the revenue to help us do it. I mean, we want to deal with the affordable housing issue. We understand that that's probably the key to reducing poverty on a very grand scale. We get that. But we are really chained to the fact that we don't have the funding to do these things. So I think mayors in Ontario and across Canada have got to be much more assertive in dealing with their federal and provincial partners and requesting of them to treat us as municipal politicians as equal partners.
And my advice would be communication, and communication being key, because I see most of our problem is with miscommunication. People thinking that if the city adopts living wage, that everybody in the city has to pay a living wage. And though we like that, that's not true. Some people are concerned about a ripple effect if we raise people at the bottom, that everybody is going to expect a 20%, 40% raise. And this is where my advice is to involve your union executives, your senior staff, and communicate regularly with all your staff. I found looking at the research, there's some good research done by Living Wage Employers, Evidence of UK Business Cases, and they talk about it says one of the first people from a company called KPMG said, "Never underestimate the amount of positive engagement you generate from employees already above the living wage who will never see any changes because of it." And I think that happens when you communicate to your employees through your senior staff, through your union executives, why you're raising people at the bottom and what that means and what the living wage is and why we have it. And most people are happy and proud of your organization, that you are going to make sure that all employees, not just themselves, but everyone, is making a decent standard of living.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's good advice, that you know, communicating is absolutely critical, and that capturing the learning, and as you've just done with the KPMG quote, Pam, you know, to get that perspective out there is pretty important in helping people get over whatever resistance they might have to this. This has been tremendously helpful in helping us understand living wage, and in particular understanding the practical issues that you've faced and that a city is going to face in bringing forward such a policy. We've collected a number of questions from our for our speakers in advance of today's calls, and many people on the call have submitted questions that they wanted to pose. And what I'm going to do is turn to those now, and I'm going to ask some of those and give Doug and Pam a chance to respond. So the first one is, how did you determine the value of your living wage, and what kind of considerations did you bring in, and what expenses are included in the figure?
Okay. A living wage is the hourly wage a worker needs to earn to cover the family's basic expenses within their community. It is calculated based on the needs of a two-parent family with young children, but would also support a family throughout the life cycle, so that young adults
are not discouraged from having children, and older workers have some extra income as they age. In Waterloo Region, the 2014-15 living wage rate is $16.05 an hour. The living wage includes expenses such as food, clothing, shelter, child care, transportation, medical expenses, recreation, and a modest vacation. The living wage does not include retirement savings, debt repayment, home ownership, savings for children's education, or anything other than the smallest cushion for emergencies or hard times. To calculate the living wage for an employer, we take into account their employee's total compensation package, in other words, wages plus benefits. If the employees receive non-mandatory benefits, the living wage rate is reduced to take this into account. For instance, here, if we pay extended health insurance, we can deduct $1.15 per hour from the living wage.
So over time, how do you manage changes then as costs rise, and have you made an ongoing commitment to keep up with the living wages as it increases? Is there some kind of consideration of indexing or another approach to this?
Well, I think over a period of time, as a municipal council, we keep an eye on all those different cost factors that Pam was talking about, and certainly it's an ongoing review and it's an ongoing reporting mechanism to council about the adjustments that need to be made. No different really in some respects than adjustments we make for wages for our salaried employees and so on. So I think that's kind of the approach that we take. It's really about having a good relationship with your staff and your staff understanding and being 100% supportive of where you're going with this. And then you get the communication, then you get the proper information, then you can make the adjustments.
Mm-hmm. And on a positive note, if we can improve affordable housing in Cambridge and throughout the country, maybe we can lower some of those costs.
Mm-hmm.
Need more money, Alan.
Well,
we're looking forward to the budget in March 22nd.
I got my knee pads ready. I'm all set.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you have I think a really good perspective on this, not only as one of you mentioned earlier, the right thing to do, but also an intelligent thing to do in terms of all the kind of value and people that it liberates and it gets, a lot of that value gets liberated into the economy. And so that's like the economy, but I'm always interested in the political economy of these things as well. And you talked about the almost unanimous support that you have on council for this, but there must have been naysayers and there must have been some blocks of opposition that you had to this. Perhaps, as Pam has suggested, not as well informed as it could be, but could you talk a little bit more, because I know a lot of people on the call are thinking, gee, we'd love to do this in our city, but we don't, we need to figure out how to get over the resistance. Could you talk a little bit more about where there was existing? Go ahead.
A bit of a reflection. I was quite surprised at how actually easily this went through. I think that if you want to get people upset, build a brand new city hall. I've gone through that kind of process. Or build a rec center that people don't like the fact you haven't put all the right components in. But in terms of this particular issue, I have to say that I was quite surprised at the reaction to it, which overall I think was very positive. Of course, you get people in the business community, which we expected, are concerned about the effects on their different businesses and so on. But that was really, I think, on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like a 5 in terms of discontent or opposition, or however you want to state it.
Well, also with our council, it's interesting background. We have a majority of council with community service background. We have 4 teachers, 2 police officers, so retired, but used to seeing all of the community and all the needs of the community. Mm-hmm. And I also think we got it through by stressing that we're not doing it all at once. We're going to take this one step at a time. So don't be afraid of the first step. It's almost like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So some people say we'll never get to champion. Well, because we may never get to champion doesn't mean we don't start at the supporter level and work our way towards that. So all we've said to the naysayers is we're going in this direction. We're giving you a commitment. You know, watch what's happening. For instance, every time they've said they've, you know, raising minimum wage, people will say, well, they'll cause all these jobs to be lost. And that's not the reality. And if you look at the business cases that have gone through, we have 20 employers now in Waterloo region, many in Cambridge, that have done this living wage, and they all talk in terms of the positives. It hasn't cost them the money that people said they would. They haven't had to reduce the number of employees. They've been very happy. And again, money's going into the local economy. You know, their productivity goes up. The morale goes up. You know, people who used to have to work 2 jobs now can work 1. They're better rested. It's not all about money, but people need to not be worried about money constantly, you know, when they're at work. So all of these things, as we grow slowly, we can prove to our community that this is something that's good for everyone. And as we said earlier, it's the right thing to do, but economically, it's also the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in a number of the questions that have been submitted are interested in the question of how you encourage other workplaces and organizations to adopt similar policies in the region, and the extent to which you might be setting Cambridge up as an example or a role model. And I'm also curious about Cambridge sits in a cluster of cities in the region, and what kind of considerations might be going on in the other city halls in the region?
Well, the 3 main cities are Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. Cambridge is the 2nd largest in this community of the region of Waterloo. We have 4 townships. What's very particular and significant about this region is the close working relationship of all the elected officials, and it really helps in terms of various ideas, innovations that we try within our communities. We actually, the 3 mayors, as an example of the cities, we all go to each other's state of the city, and we compare ourselves about how well we're doing and how well we're not doing in some respects. So by that relationship alone, we really export out our different ideas. Living wage is out there, and I'll be talking to the other mayors, and we work on those kind of concepts to make things better.
And the region of Waterloo is considering this right now, and which is great. City of Hamilton is considering it. I think that I know with staff often they say, what are the other municipalities doing? And often they're reluctant to be first, but we're happy that we're first, and I think it just encourages other municipalities. For instance, I was reading an article from the London Free Press, are talking about the London, I guess, chief medical person has said that he wants to do living wage for the hospital there, that kind of thing. So I think the more people that hear about living wage, the more employers that are talking about it, the more people are going to be less fearful of trying it. I know we'll be reaching out to all the people we have contracts with and discussing it. It's being discussed at the Chamber of Commerce, the BIA, and the more we can reassure people, the more publicity it gets, I think it's going to move forward.
I love the idea of the 3 amigos down there. And
well, you're right about that.
Yeah, that's great. It's a good way to get things done. So a number of people have raised the question of working with the unions around the issue of living wage, and raised questions of whether living wage is written into any of the union agreements. Could you talk about that a bit?
Well, pretty well all our union employees right now receive over the minimum wage,
Yeah.
I mean the living wage, but it was purposeful to put the 2 union presidents that we have from QP onto our steering committee. And they're very positive about this happening, and are going to be very helpful in explaining to their union members why, if they hear that a crossing guard got a 40% raise or a 20% raise, that doesn't mean that they will also be looking at that kind of raise. They're very supportive, and I think the you know, I know our unions here, because they are already making the living wage, we haven't had to adjust any contracts. But in other cities or other companies, they've been able to do it, I think, by just amending the contract with the permission of the union, because it's usually to raise someone who is not making that living wage.
In the city of Cambridge, we've always had a long history of labor peace here, and that's because of the communications that we have effectively with our senior staff dealing with the unions. I can't think of the last strike, perhaps going back into the late 70s when there was a strike in Cambridge. So that just goes to show you the labor peace, the labor interreaction we have with the council, and I think that's also key. And I think it's very significant in moving along these types of issues like living wage on an open line of communication and working in concert with the unions all the time.
It's always been one of the great benefits of unions that they are focused around these issues. They may not have historically called it living wage, but making sure that working people are paid in a just way for the work that they do. So it's great that that you've been able to work with them so well. A lot of people are interested in kind of biggest challenges or barriers that you've come up with against implementing the living wage policy. You mentioned some of those, but how might you kind of focus just people's, if you're going to give some advice on what are the big challenges you can expect or the big barriers that you might anticipate as you in your community work towards living wage?
Well, I think, you know, I think we've led the way. The biggest barrier, of course, is being first. Now that we're first, it makes it easier for other communities now to take that actual step and to look at an example of a community that's already instituted this. Look at the example in terms of what we went through in terms of opposition, which really was quite muted in a lot of respects. And I think that's first. It's the first step. It's the most difficult part of anything.
And again, the miscommunication, making people really understand what it means and that it can be done in a step-by-step process. You know, I think people immediately see, I think maybe it's the, how would I put it, the pessimism sometimes or negativity where someone will say, I don't make $16 an hour. How come you're using taxpayer money to pay someone $16 an hour, you know, because they're just helping kids cross the street, that kind of thing, where people want to drag people down as opposed to raise people up, you know, and I think that's something you constantly have to fight, is to say we're trying to make everyone on a higher plane, not drag everyone down to the lowest level. And you know, you always have that kind of criticism, and you know, whenever we spend taxpayers' money on anything, you'll get criticism from certain quarters. But I can't think of anything better to spend it on than on people, and people giving them the money to pay for the necessities of life when they're working full-time, part-time. You know, these are what, you know, our society should be striving for. So in that sense, I make no apologies to them.
Well, it's such an important role of political leadership as you're describing it to be out in front of people with the to inspire them around something like this, and to deal with that negativity that will come up from time to time. Doug, I know that you're, as the mayor, and having been mayor for a considerable period of time, you're constantly in front of the community. Are there strategic audiences you can think of that you need to be focusing on?
Well, yeah, I believe in the concept of balance in the community. So I always am looking towards us in terms of social services. You know, the food bank, the shelter, the social planning council, and these people are whom I know well are the thermometer for the community in terms of these issues. So those are the specific groups in the beginning that we start with. I also have good relationships, of course, with the Chamber of Commerce, and that's another group. And I know there's some polarization on both sides there, but I recognize the fact that you know, we can all speak and we can all talk about these things. The problem municipal councillors face in many issues and decisions they make is they're dependent on a property tax which is very visible. And because it's a visible tax, it becomes difficult to, as Pam says, to spend taxpayers' money all the time. So that's part of the issue of the ongoing problem of revenue issues. But we have in Cambridge, I think, certainly across the council and across the city, established all the right relationships to, in fact, when we go out on a new adventure, to put that out there and explain it in a better way. Only people we're working on right now are the news media. It's difficult.
I was just going to ask you that question. I mean, how have they responded to this? What has their coverage been? I know in Hamilton, for years, the Hamilton Spectator has been one of the great advocates for anti-poverty measures and has been very helpful to people in that community. What has your media been like?
I think overall it's been pretty good, and I think
I know you can't criticize them, Doug. I know you can't criticize them.
Well, we can. Yeah. But no, the news media here I think has been very positive and fairly progressive, and I think certainly getting better reviews in the living wage than I'm getting on my new rec center. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, I was going to say I was interviewed twice by CBC, and that's but generally always a fair radio station, and and intelligent questions. But the papers, I think, reported it quite well. So I was pleased, and we, you know, I guess in that sense, we have been lucky.
Yeah, well, it's an important consideration, and you know, sometimes you get, I'll say it, because you as politicians maybe are reluctant to say it, but sometimes you get the media that is busy tearing things down or finding fault and catching people doing things wrong. And
that's if you live in Toronto. We live out Toronto. You got the Toronto Sun. Good luck. But anyways, yeah. I shouldn't say that. But anyways, no, the media here has been pretty good. You know, it's and you work with the different editors and reporters, and you have good years and other years you wish they were a bit better. But it all works out.
Yeah, but it is an important piece, I think, for people to pay attention to, is that, as you say, it's working with them over time that helps them to not necessarily get on side, because that's not their role, but to at least give a fair hearing and to tell the broader story that you're, as you've been describing it to us, about the overall positive impacts that you get from a living wage kind of model. And the last, I'll just pose one last question before we wrap up here, and this gives you a chance to sum up a bit. But you've done a lot of work in not just in Cambridge, but in the region generally, across sectors, to reduce poverty. And I'm just wondering, you know, that we've been talking about the living wage, but what you might identify as the things you're most proud of, and maybe what you would describe as your greatest successes in moving forward on anti-poverty work in Cambridge.
Well, I think in Cambridge and throughout the region, you know, I'm also a regional councillor in this particular situation. The region of Waterloo has been a leader in Ontario in terms of affordable housing, and Pam, as an example down here, in terms of her committee work, has done a great deal of put a great deal of effort into affordable housing, and we just have passed some some legislation recently to make affordable housing more of a realistic outcome than we had seen in the past. But something like discretionary funding, when the province cut the discretionary funding, we were the one region in Ontario that in fact came to the table and supplemented the lost transfer payments from the province. So I'm quite proud of that, and quite proud of the fact that we've taken an aggressive role in terms of our anti-poverty stand.
And I'm very proud of our mayor. He has really to the forefront on a number of occasions. For instance, recently we have Haven House, which is a women's crisis center, which we're building a new facility for. And frankly, the province dropped the ball and gave them no money after promising some money. And the first thing the mayor did after being reelected was give $25,000 to Haven House. And then after that, we gave them a grant to cover all of their development charges. And we also, and so did the region. And also, we're just going to be having a fundraiser at City Hall for Haven House. And this is just one aspect of where the city is stepping up to something that's actually a provincial responsibility. We have one of the best, most effective self-help food banks in Ontario, perhaps in Canada, where they have so many amazing programs run out of that, and we're also proud of that. Our homeless shelter, the Bridges, if you look at it, you think you're going to a beautiful hotel, a chateau it looks like, and it has over 50 programs that it runs from the shelter. And again, something we're proud of as a community, that I think Cambridge is known for many things, but it's also known as a city with a heart, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of. And as Doug said, we've just passed these municipal incentives for affordable housing, and we will be building, starting this spring, a new 35 unit apartment building for affordable housing on our new transit route.
Well, that's great. And you, I think, have done a tremendous job down there, and I think in good part it's due to the fantastic political leadership that we've had from council and from the mayor. It's time to wrap up. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark, but I want to, first of all, thank the listeners for sending in the questions and for being with us today. But particularly to thank you, Doug, and Pam, for your thoughtful responses to the questions and for all the work you're doing down there. It's really it is a city with heart, but it's a good example for cities across the country. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alan. I just want to say, Alan, too, that you're a leader in this, and we recognize this very much. And I want to just say that in fact I recognized over the past number of years of your input and your concerns into the working poor of Canada, affordable housing issues, and making cities stronger. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Doug. That's very kind of you. So let me now turn it back to Mark Holmgren, and he'll close the webinar with a few announcements. Mark?
Thank you, Alan. Thanks so much for leading us through today's interview. And to Mayor Craig and Councillor Wolf, not only thank you for being here, but thanks for the leadership you're showing in your community and to the country, and the leadership shown by your colleagues and others in the community. This is an incredibly informative session, I think also provocative in terms of motivating all of us to think about how we can bring some of the learnings home to our communities that you share with us today. So many thanks. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's webinar and would like to access more information about poverty reduction, I want to invite you to subscribe to Vibrant Communities' monthly newsletter, Cities Connect, and to join the Vibrant Communities online learning community for poverty reduction practitioners. The website's www.vibrantcanada.ca, and in a few days' time, we'll be posting a recording of today's broadcast on the website, along with a PDF copy of the slides. Also, previously, Alan mentioned that Tamarack, as many of you know, is hosting an event called Cities Reducing Poverty when Mayors Lead. It's on April 5th and 7th in Edmonton, and I invite you to attend via the registration link on the screen. This is going to be a landmark event. I don't know of any event that's been sponsored by community that's bringing together so many mayors, city staff, councillors, provincial and territorial leaders, and so forth to look at how cities are currently reducing poverty. And I can assure you the conversation about living wage will continue at that forum. So if you're able to come, we certainly welcome you. There's still some seats left. In a few days, all of you who attended, you'll get a follow-up email with a link to the auto recording of today's call. You may also email Natasha at tamarackcommunity.ca to provide feedback about today's webinar. We're always trying to get better and make sure that what we're doing is relevant for all of you. And on that note, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks again to our interviewer and our interviewees. And on that, I wish you all a great day.